You need to leave. Now." The words came out harsher than Alara intended, but panic had a way of stripping away politeness. She stood frozen in the corner of the grand hall, her back pressed against the cold stone wall, her apron still dusted with flour from the kitchens where she had been working just moments before. The banquet had descended into chaos. Nobles screamed and scrambled over each other, their fine silks tearing as they pushed toward the exits. Guards shouted commands that no one followed. And in the center of it all, circling with predatory grace, was the creature that had turned the celebration into a nightmare. The beast was massive, easily 3 times the size of the largest wolf Alara had ever seen. Its fur was the color of midnight and storm clouds mixed together, rippling with an otherworldly sheen that seemed to absorb the light from the chandeliers above. Its eyes glowed with an ancient amber fire, and when it opened its mouth, rows of teeth longer than daggers gleamed white against black gums. This was no ordinary wolf. This was something from the time before time, from the old stories whispered in the dark when people wanted to frighten children into obedience. This was the firstborn, the original, the beast that King Alpha Theron had brought back from the Shadowlands as proof of his conquest. Except now it was loose, and no one could control it. Alara watched as Commander Marcus tried to approach the creature with a silver chain, speaking in the old tongue that was supposed to compel obedience from any shifter. The beast looked at him with what could only be described as amusement before letting out a roar that shook the crystal glasses still remaining on the tables. Marcus stumbled backward, his face pale, his confidence shattered. The beast took a step toward him, and Alara was certain she was about to witness a death. But then something happened that she could not explain. The beast stopped. Its massive head swiveled, nostrils flaring as it scented the air, and then those ancient amber eyes locked directly onto her. Alara felt her breath catch in her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to move, to do anything except stand there like a rabbit caught in a trap. But her legs would not obey. Her body had turned to stone. The beast began to move toward her, each step deliberate and heavy, causing the marble floor to vibrate beneath her feet. The remaining people in the hall pressed themselves against the far walls, watching in horrified fascination. Alara heard someone whisper a prayer to the moon goddess. She heard another person sob. And then the beast was directly in front of her, so close that she could feel the heat radiating from its body, could smell the wild scent of pine and earth and something older than memory. She waited for the pain. She waited for the end. Instead, the impossible happened. The beast lowered its massive head. Slowly, deliberately, it bent its neck until its forehead nearly touched the ground at her feet. The gesture was unmistakable. Submission, recognition, reverence. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the crackling of the torches seemed to quiet in the face of what everyone had just witnessed. Alara stared down at the creature bowing before her, her mind struggling to process what was happening. This beast did not bow. According to everything she had heard since it arrived at the palace 3 days ago, this creature bowed to no one, not even King Theron himself, who had captured it through ancient magic and binding rituals. Yet here it was, offering her the posture of complete submission. Impossible. The voice cut through the silence like a blade. Alara looked up to see King Theron himself striding across the hall, his presence commanding immediate attention despite the chaos. He was tall, powerfully built, with dark hair that fell to his shoulders, and eyes the color of winter ice. He wore his authority like a second skin, and even now, with his banquet destroyed and his prize beast acting against all logic, he moved with absolute confidence. He stopped several feet away, studying the scene before him with an intensity that made Alara want to shrink further into the wall. "What is your name?" His question was directed at her, his tone neither kind nor cruel, simply demanding an answer. "Ilara, your majesty." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. She hated how weak she sounded, but in the presence of the Alpha King, Himself, with an ancient beast bowing at her feet, weakness felt like the only honest response. Ilara. He repeated her name as if testing how it felt in his mouth. And what are you, Ilara? What pack do you belong to? She swallowed hard. This was the question she had dreaded her entire life, the question that always reduced her to nothing in the eyes of other wolves. I am packless, Your Majesty. I work in the kitchens. I have no wolf. The confession hung in the air like an indictment. To be wolfless among shifters was to be incomplete, defective, less than whole. Murmurs rippled through the remaining crowd. Someone laughed, a sharp bark of disbelief. A wolfless Omega? The voice belonged to Lady Seraphine, who stood near the dais in a gown of silver and sapphire, her perfect blonde hair still immaculately styled despite the chaos. She was everything Ilara was not: powerful, beautiful, connected to one of the oldest bloodlines in the kingdom. She was also, according to Pallas, gossip, intended to become Theron's Queen Luna through a political alliance that would unite the northern and southern territories. Your Majesty, surely this is some kind of trick. Perhaps the beast is ill, or under some enchantment. Seraphine's tone dripped with dismissal. No creature of such power would bow to something so insignificant. The beast made a sound then, a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through Ilara's bones. Its head was still lowered, but she could see its muscles tensing. See the way its lips pulled back from those massive teeth. It was reacting to Seraphine's words, to the insult directed at Ilara, defending her. Theron noticed too. His eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer, studying Ilara with renewed interest. "Rise," he commanded the beast, using the binding words that were supposed to compel obedience. The creature did not move. "I said, rise." His voice grew harder, layered with the alpha command that could bring any wolf to their knees. Still, the beast remained bowed before Ilara. The tension in the hall grew thick enough to choke on. An alpha king whose commands were being ignored was a dangerous thing. Ilara could see the muscle ticking in Theron's jaw, could sense the barely contained power rolling off him in waves. But beneath the anger, there was something else in his expression. Curiosity. Fascination. Ilara. He spoke her name again, and this time it sounded different, weighted with possibility. "Touch it. Place your hand on its head." "Your Majesty, I do not think that is wise." The words came from an elderly man in formal robes, who Ilara recognized as Elder Cassius, one of the king's advisors. The beast could take her hand off, or worse. She is just a kitchen worker, not worth the risk. "I will determine what is worth the risk in my own kingdom, Elder." Theron's tone left no room for argument. He looked back at Ilara, and something in his gaze sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. "Do it. Touch the beast." Ilara's hand trembled as she slowly reached forward. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was insane, that she was about to lose her hand or her life or both. But something deeper, something she could not name, urged her forward. Her fingers connected with the thick fur between the beast's ears. The moment her skin made contact, the world exploded into sensation. Heat rushed through her body like wildfire, starting at her fingertips and racing along her arm, through her chest, down to her very core. Images flashed through her mind. Ancient forests untouched by time, ceremonies under full moons, voices chanting in languages that no longer existed, and power. So much power that it felt like drowning in an ocean of pure energy. She gasped, her knees buckling, but before she could fall, strong arms caught her. Theron had moved with inhuman speed, and now he held her against his chest, his own breath coming faster than it should. "What did you see?" His voice was low, urgent, spoken directly into her ear. "I saw everything," she whispered, still reeling from the visions. I saw the beginning. The beast finally moved, raising its head and making a sound that was almost like a purr, a deep rumbling that seemed pleased. It looked between Alara and Theron, with what could only be described as approval, and then it did something even more shocking. It pressed its massive body against both of them, as if trying to push them closer together. Extraordinary. Theron's arms were still around Alara, and she became acutely aware of his scent. Pine and leather, and something wild that called to a part of her she had not known existed. Her heart hammered in her chest, and she felt heat rising to her cheeks. This was the Alpha King. She should not be in his arms. She should not be feeling this pull toward him, this inexplicable sense of rightness. Your Majesty, please. Seraphine's voice had lost its polished edge, now carrying a sharp note of something that sounded almost like fear. This display is unseemly. The girl should be taken to the dungeons for questioning. Clearly she has used some form of dark magic to bewitch your beast. Theron slowly released Alara, though his hand lingered at her elbow as if reluctant to completely break contact. He turned to face Seraphine, and his expression was carved from ice. What I find unseemly, Lady Seraphine, is your presumption to tell me how to handle affairs in my own palace. Alara will not be going to any dungeon. She will be given chambers in the royal wing. The pronouncement caused an immediate uproar. Nobles who had been cowering against the walls suddenly found their voices, protesting and arguing over each other. Seraphine's face went white, then red, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. Elder Cassius stepped forward, his expression grave. Your Majesty, with all due respect, such an action would be highly irregular. The girl is an Omega, and wolfless at that. To place her in the royal wing suggests a status she does not possess. It would cause confusion about her position, about your intentions. And there is your betrothal to Lady Seraphine to consider. Theron's laugh was cold and sharp. I was unaware that I required permission from my council to determine sleeping arrangements in my own palace. Alara has demonstrated a connection to the firstborn that even I do not possess. Until we understand what that means, she will remain close at hand. That is not a request. That is a command. He looked down at Alara, and some of the hardness left his features. Can you stand? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Her legs still felt unsteady, but she forced them to support her weight. The beast pressed against her side, offering physical support, and she found herself leaning into its warmth without thinking. Good. Commander Marcus will escort you to your new chambers. You will have attendants, proper clothing, everything you need. Tomorrow we will begin. Trying to understand what you are. What I am, Alara repeated, confused. Your Majesty, I am nothing. Just a kitchen worker who somehow did not run fast enough. No. Theron reached out and tilted her chin up with one finger, forcing her to meet his eyes. The touch sent sparks across her skin, and she saw his pupils dilate in response. He felt it too, whatever this was. You are not nothing, Alara. The firstborn does not bow to nothing. Ancient magic does not recognize nothing. What you are is a mystery, and I have always been fascinated by mysteries. He stepped back, breaking the contact, and Alara felt the loss of his touch like a physical ache. Take her, he commanded Marcus, who had recovered enough from his earlier fear to step forward. Ensure she has everything she requires, and post guards at her door, for her protection. The last words were directed at the nobles still gathered around, a clear warning that anyone who thought to harm Alara would answer to the king himself. As Marcus gently guided her toward the exit, Alara caught Seraphine's gaze. The lady's eyes were filled with such pure hatred that Alara actually stumbled. Seraphine smiled then, a cold curve of lips that promised retribution. Enjoy your new chambers while you can, little mouse, Seraphine said softly, though her voice carried clearly through the hall. Mysteries are often solved quickly. and then they become quite disposable. Ilara wanted to respond, wanted to defend herself, but what could she possibly say? Seraphine was right. Once Theron figured out why the beast had reacted to her, once the novelty wore off, she would be sent back to the kitchens if she was lucky. Or worse, if she was not. The beast made that rumbling growl again, louder this time, and took a step toward Seraphine. The lady actually backed up, her composure cracking for just a moment. "Control your pet, Your Majesty," Seraphine said, trying to recover her dignity. "It should be in chains, not roaming. Free to threaten your guests." "The firstborn is not a pet," Theron replied calmly. "And it seems to have excellent judgment about who deserves threats." He made a gesture, and the beast immediately moved back to Ilara's side, pressing against her legs. "It will accompany her to her chambers. Consider it additional protection." The walk through the palace corridors felt surreal. Ilara had worked in the kitchens for 5 years, and in that time, she had only ventured into the upper levels above, handful of times to help serve during major banquets. Now she was being led through the royal wing itself, past tapestries worth more than she would earn in a lifetime, beneath crystal chandeliers that cast rainbow light across marble floors, so polished they reflected like mirrors. Other servants pressed themselves against the walls as they passed, staring at her with wide eyes. Some looked confused, others envious, a few fearful. Ilara kept her gaze straight ahead, trying to ignore the whispers that followed in her wake. The beast walked beside her, its presence both comforting and terrifying. Commander Marcus stopped before a set of double doors carved with intricate moon phases. "These will be your chambers," he said formally. "I apologize for the earlier chaos. In my defense, no one expected the firstborn to escape its bonds." He pushed open the doors, and Ilara could not contain her gasp. The chambers were larger than the entire kitchen where she had spent her working life. A massive 4-poster bed dominated one wall, its posts carved to look like ancient trees, reaching toward a ceiling painted to resemble a night sky. Thick carpets covered the floors, and a fireplace large enough to stand in blazed with welcoming warmth. Through another doorway, she could see a bathing room with a tub that could fit 3 people. "This cannot be for me," she whispered. "These are too grand. There must be some mistake." Marcus shook his head. The king's orders were clear. These chambers belonged to his late mother, actually. He has not allowed anyone to use them since her passing 5 years ago. The information stunned Ilara into silence. The Queen Mother's chambers. Theron had given her his mother's rooms. What did that mean? Marcus seemed to read her confusion. "I cannot explain the king's thinking, girl. I only follow orders. Attendants will arrive shortly to help you bathe and dress. Try to get some rest. Tomorrow will likely be intense." He paused at the door, glancing back at the beast that had made itself comfortable on the carpet near the fireplace. "That creature has killed men twice my size without hesitation. Whatever you did to earn its loyalty, I suggest you figure out how to maintain it. Your life may depend on it." Then he was gone, leaving Ilara alone with the beast, and a silence so complete she could hear her own heartbeat. She moved slowly to the bed and sat on its edge, her flour-dusted apron looking absurdly out of place against the fine silk coverlet. The beast watched her with those ancient amber eyes, and she found herself speaking to it, as if it could understand. "What am I supposed to do now? I do not understand any of this. Why did you bow to me? I am nobody. I have no power, no wolf, no anything." The beast made a soft chuffing sound and rose to its feet. It crossed the room and placed its massive head in her lap, looking up at her with an expression that was shockingly gentle. Slowly, hesitantly, Ilara stroked its fur. It was softer than she expected, and warm, and the beast made that rumbling purr sound again. "You really do not want to hurt me, do you?" she murmured. "But why? What do you see that no one else can?" As if in answer, the beast pulled back and then did something that made Alara's breath stop. It shimmered. There was no other word for it. Its form rippled like water, and for just a moment, she saw something else. Not the beast, but a figure. Tall, wrapped in shadows and starlight, with eyes that held the weight of ages. A voice echoed in her mind, neither male nor female, but ancient beyond measure. "We have waited so long for you to wake, daughter of the first guardians. The blood remembers what the flesh forgot. Soon you will remember too." Then the vision was gone, and it was just the beast again, watching her with knowing eyes. Alara felt tears streaming down her face without knowing when she had started crying. "I do not understand," she whispered. "Please, I do not understand." A knock at the door interrupted whatever response the beast might have made. Alara quickly wiped her tears and called out permission to enter. 3 young women came in, all dressed in the neat uniforms of royal attendants. They curtsied to her, actually curtsied, and Alara had to fight the urge to laugh at the absurdity. "Miss Alara, we are here to help you prepare for the evening," the eldest of the 3 said. She had kind eyes and a gentle smile. "I am Marie, and these are Hannah and Rose. We will be your personal attendants from now on." "I do not need personal attendants," Alara protested. "I can take care of myself." "Perhaps," Marie agreed, "but the king has commanded it, and we rather enjoy having employment, so if you would be so kind as to allow us to do our jobs, we would be most grateful." There was a hint of humor in her tone that made Alara relax slightly. She nodded, and the 3 women immediately sprang into action. They filled the enormous bathing tub with steaming water scented with oils that smelled of lavender, and something else, something that reminded Alara of moonlight, though she could not explain how a scent could do that. They helped her undress, their gasps at her thin frame and calloused hands carefully suppressed but not completely hidden. The water was almost painfully hot, but in a good way. Alara sank into it and felt 5 years of kitchen labor begin to ease from her muscles. Hannah washed her hair with a gentleness that made Alara want to weep. When was the last time anyone had touched her with kindness? Rose scrubbed her hands and feet, carefully cleaning the flour from beneath her nails and the burns from hot pans that marked her forearms. "You have worked hard," Rose observed quietly. "These are the hands of someone who understands what it means to survive." If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. Alara did not respond. She could not find words that would adequately express what she was feeling. Gratitude, confusion, fear, hope. They all tangled together into a knot in her chest. When she finally emerged from the bath, wrapped in towels softer than anything she had ever touched, Marie presented her with a nightgown of pale blue silk. "This is too fine," Alara protested. "I will ruin it." "Nonsense, it is yours. Everything in these chambers is now yours." Marie helped her into the gown, and Alara caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror across the room. She barely recognized the woman looking back. Without the grime of the kitchens, without her hair pulled back in a severe bun, without the shapeless servant's dress, she looked almost pretty. Not beautiful like Lady Seraphine, but not entirely unfortunate either. "You have lovely bone structure," Hannah said softly. "And your eyes are remarkable. I have never seen that particular shade of gray before. They almost look silver in the right light." Before Alara could respond, another knock sounded at the door. Marie opened it, and Alara's heart began to race when she saw who stood there. Theron, the Alpha King himself, come to her chambers. He had changed from his formal banquet attire into simpler clothing, dark pants and a loose white shirt that did nothing to hide the powerful build beneath. His hair was slightly damp, as if he had also bathed, and he looked somehow more human, more accessible than he had in the throne room. But his eyes still held that piercing intensity that made Alara feel like he could see straight through to her soul. "Leave us," he commanded the attendants. They curtsied and quickly departed, though Marie gave Alara an encouraging smile before she closed the doors. Alara stood frozen near the bed, suddenly intensely aware that she was wearing only a nightgown in the presence of the most powerful man in the kingdom. The beast rose from its spot by the fire and moved between them, not threatening, but clearly establishing itself as a barrier. Theron raised an eyebrow. "Even my own firstborn protects you. Fascinating." He moved to one of the chairs near the fireplace and sat, gesturing for Alara to take the other. "Sit. I promise I am not here to ravish you, no matter what the gossips will say about this visit." Alara's face flamed hot, but she forced herself to move to the chair. She perched on its edge, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. Every etiquette lesson she had ever absorbed from watching the nobility told her she was doing this wrong, but she had no idea what the right way to sit with a king in your bedchamber might be. "Relax," Theron said, and there was amusement in his voice. "You look like you expect me to announce your execution at any moment. Forgive me, Your Majesty, but I have no idea why you are here or what you want from me, and that is rather terrifying." The honesty slipped out before she could stop it, and she immediately, regretted her boldness. But Theron simply laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his entire face. Honesty. What a refreshing change from the usual court sycophants. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze fixed on her with that unnerving intensity. "I am here because I cannot stop thinking about what happened in the throne room. I am here because the firstborn has never shown submission to anyone, and yet it bowed to you as if you were an empress. I am here because when I touched you, when I caught you before you fell, I felt something that I have not felt in a very long time." His voice dropped lower. "I felt the mate bond, Alara, and I think you felt it too." The world tilted sideways. Alara gripped the arms of the chair to keep from falling out of it. "That is impossible," she whispered. "I do not have a wolf. I cannot be anyone's mate, let alone yours. And yet the bond does not lie. It does not care about logic or propriety or what should be possible. It simply is." He ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time, she saw uncertainty in his expression. "I have spent 5 years resisting every attempt by my council to force me into a political marriage. They push Seraphine at me constantly, telling me that the alliance with her family is essential for the kingdom's stability. And perhaps it is. But I have always believed that a true alpha king should have a true mate, someone chosen by destiny, not by council decree. But I cannot be that person," Alara insisted. "Look at me. I am nobody. I was a kitchen worker this morning. I have no training, no education, no understanding of politics or court life. I would be a disaster as a queen. Would you? Or is that simply what you have been told your entire life, that you are not good enough, not worthy enough, not enough?" Theron's words cut through her protests with surgical precision. "I have watched you since the moment you touched the firstborn. You did not faint or scream or fall apart. You stood your ground with dignity, even when everyone around you was calling you insignificant. That takes a kind of strength that no amount of noble bloodline can provide." Alara wanted to believe him. Every fiber of her being wanted to believe that what he was saying could be true. But years of being dismissed, ignored, treated as less than others had carved deep grooves in her psyche. "Your council will never accept me. Lady Seraphine will destroy me the first chance she gets. And without a wolf, I cannot even defend myself properly. Then we will have to figure out why you do not have a wolf, will we not?" Theron stood and moved closer, crouching down so they were at eye level. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. The contact sent that now familiar spark racing up her arm, and she saw his eyes flash with gold, his wolf rising in response. I felt something when you touched the firstborn. When I caught you, there was a transfer. Of energy. Of visions. What did you see, Alara? Tell me everything." She took a shaky breath and tried to put the chaotic images into words. "I saw forests that looked older than time. I saw ceremonies under the moon with people who did not look quite human. I heard chanting in languages I do not know. And I felt power, so much power that it was overwhelming. It felt like drowning and flying at the same time." Theron's grip on her hand tightened. The old magic. The first magic, from before the great dividing when we split into separate species. "Ilara, what you are describing sounds like the guardian ceremonies." "Guardian ceremonies?" "The first protectors of the shifter races. According to legend, they were chosen by the moon goddess herself to maintain balance between the human world and the supernatural. They had abilities that went beyond simple shifting. They could speak to all animals, could heal with a touch, could commune directly with the divine. But the bloodlines were thought to have died out 1,000 years ago. He studied her face as if seeing her for the first time. Unless they did not die out. Unless they simply went dormant, waiting for the right moment to resurface. "That is impossible," Alara said again, but this time her voice held less certainty. "If I had any kind of special bloodline, someone would have known. My parents would have told me." "Would they? Or did they die before they could?" Theron's question was gentle but struck like a blow. "You said you were an orphan. How old were you when you lost your family?" 5. There was a fire. I barely remember them." The old grief rose up, surprising her with its strength after so many years. "I remember my mother's voice singing lullabies. I remember my father's hands lifting me up to see the stars. But their faces are blurry now. And I never knew where we came from before we arrived at the pack that took me in after the fire." "A fire." Theron's voice went hard. "Ilara, guardian. Families were systematically hunted during the last Great War. Those with the old blood were seen as threats by the new regimes. Many were killed. Their children scattered to prevent the bloodlines from continuing. If your parents knew what you were, they might have hidden it to protect you." The implications crashed over Alara like a wave. Everything she had believed about herself, about her place in the world, might be built on lies of protection. "But I still do not have a wolf. If I have this ancient bloodline, why can I not shift?" "Because perhaps you are not supposed to shift into just a wolf." Theron stood and began pacing, his mind clearly working through possibilities. "The Guardians did not have wolves in the way we do. Their connection to the primal force was more direct, more pure. They could take multiple forms, or sometimes no form at all. The power manifested differently." He stopped pacing and looked at her. "The firstborn recognized you because you carry the same essence it does. The original essence, before we fragmented into lesser forms. That is why it bowed. It was not submission. It was recognition of kinship." "This is too much," Ilara whispered. Her head was spinning, her heart racing. "Yesterday I was worried about whether Cook would yell at me for burning the bread. Now you are telling me I might be descended from legendary guardians, and that I am your mate, and that an ancient beast thinks I am its kin. How am I supposed to process any of this?" Theron moved back to her chair and knelt before her again, taking both her hands this time. His touch grounded her, centered her in the midst of the chaos. "One step at a time. Tomorrow, we will consult with Elder Cassius and the palace archives. There are texts dating back to the Guardian era. If your bloodline is truly connected to them, there will be records, rituals, ways to awaken what has been sleeping inside you." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, the gesture both soothing and electrifying. "And in the meantime, you will stay here, in these chambers, under my protection. The mate bond is between us now, whether we asked for it or not. I will not allow anyone to harm you, Alara. Not Seraphine. Not the council. No one. Why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Why do you care? You could ignore the bond. Many alphas do. You could marry Seraphine for your political alliance and keep me as a secret if you truly believe I am your mate. His eyes flashed. Dangerously, and she felt power roll off him in waves. I am not many alphas. I am the king, and I have never hidden from truth or difficulty. If you are my mate, then you will be my queen. I do not do anything halfway, Alara. When I commit completely. The intensity in his voice, in his gaze, made it hard to breathe. Alara had never been looked at like this before. Like she mattered. Like she was precious. It was terrifying and intoxicating in equal measure. I do not know how to be. What you need me to be, she admitted. Then we will figure it out together. He released one of her hands to cup her cheek, his touch impossibly gentle for someone so powerful. I do not need you to be anything other than who you are, Alara. The rest is just details we will manage. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. For a moment, she wanted him to kiss her with an intensity that shocked her. But instead, he pulled back, standing and creating distance between them. I should go. It is late, and you need rest. Tomorrow will be demanding. He moved toward the door, but paused with his hand on the handle. The firstborn will stay with you tonight. No one will dare enter with it here. Sleep well, Alara, and try not to worry too much. Whatever comes, you will not face it alone. Then he was gone, leaving Alara alone with the beast and a heart that would not stop racing. She moved to the bed and climbed under the covers, still processing everything that had happened. The beast patted over and settled on the floor beside the bed, a warm, protective presence. He believes I am special, she whispered into the darkness. He believes I am his mate. But what if he is wrong? What if I am just an anomaly, a fluke? And when he figures that out, I lose everything all over again? The beast made a soft sound, almost like a sigh, and she felt rather than heard its response in her mind. Trust the blood. Trust the bond. Trust what has been sleeping too long but will sleep no more. Sleep found her eventually, but it was filled with dreams. She saw the same ancient forests from her earlier vision, but this time she walked through them. People emerged from the shadows, tall and ethereal, their eyes glowing with silver light. They reached for her, their hands warm, their voices welcoming. Daughter of the moon, daughter of the first light, you have wandered in darkness long enough. It is time to come home. It is time to remember who you were always meant to be. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of Marie drawing back the heavy curtains. Good morning, Miss Alara. I hope you slept well. The king has requested your presence in the council chambers within the hour. Alara sat up, her head still fuzzy from the intense dreams. The council chambers? Why? Marie's expression was carefully neutral. I am not privy to such information, miss. But Elder Cassius, the royal historian, and several other high-ranking officials are already gathered. It seems the king is serious about investigating your connection to the firstborn. An hour later, Alara stood before a long table in a chamber lined with books and ancient scrolls. She wore a simple but elegant dress in deep forest green that Marie had insisted suited her coloring. Her hair had been braided into a crown around her head, and she barely recognized herself in the mirror. Theron sat at the head of the table, dressed in his full royal regalia, every inch the commanding king. But when his eyes met hers, they softened slightly, a private acknowledgement of what had passed between them the previous night. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. Elder Cassius stood beside the table, several massive tomes spread open before him. Lady Seraphine was also present, her face a mask of polite interest that did not quite hide the venom in her eyes. Commander Marcus and several other council members completed the assembly. "Thank you for joining us, Alara," Theron said formally. "Please sit." A chair had been placed at the opposite end of the table from him, a position that was clearly meant to signify importance, but also felt impossibly exposed. Alara sat, folding her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. The firstborn had followed her to the chambers, and now lay at her feet, a clear statement about where its loyalty resided. "We have been reviewing the ancient texts," Elder Cassius began, his voice reedy with age, but sharp with intelligence. "Based on your description of the visions you experienced, I believe the king's hypothesis has merit. The symbols you described, the languages you heard, they match records we have of the Guardian era." He gestured to one of the open books, its pages covered in intricate drawings and text in a script Alara could not read. The Guardians were not like modern shifters. They were conduits of the primal force itself, chosen by the moon goddess to maintain balance. Each bloodline had specific gifts. Some could heal any wound. Others could communicate with all living things. And the rarest, the royal line, could command the primal beasts, the original creatures from which all shifter species descended. "The firstborn is one of these primal beasts," Theron added, taking up the explanation. "When I found it in the Shadowlands, it was sleeping in stasis, frozen in time by ancient magic. I used a combination of blood rituals and binding spells to wake it and bring it back. But I have never been able to fully control it. At best, I can suggest actions, and it chooses whether to comply." Seraphine laughed, a brittle sound. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, you are suggesting that this kitchen girl is descended from a line of royal guardians? It is absurd. If she had such power, it would have manifested by now. She would not have spent years scrubbing pots and baking bread. Unless her power was deliberately suppressed," Elder Cassius said quietly. "There are references in the texts to binding rituals that could lock away guardian abilities, usually performed on children to keep them hidden from those who would hunt them. The bindings were meant to break naturally when the child reached maturity and safety, but if the parents died before teaching the child how to release them, they could remain in place indefinitely." He looked at Alara with something like pity. "If your parents performed such a ritual before their deaths, you have been living with your true nature locked away inside you for 20 years. No wonder you have felt incomplete, like something essential was missing." The words resonated with a truth that Alara could not deny. She had always felt that way, like she was only half present in her own life, like some crucial part of herself was sleeping, and she could not wake it no matter how hard she tried. "How do we break the binding?" Theron asked, leaning forward with intensity. Elder Cassius hesitated. "That is where it becomes complicated. Guardian bindings were designed to be nearly unbreakable except by specific conditions. Usually, true danger to the person's life, or..." He paused, clearly uncomfortable. "Or the completion of a mate bond. The theory was that a guardian's true mate would provide enough power and support to safely break through the binding and allow the guardian's nature to emerge." The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the room turned to look between Theron and Alara. Seraphine's face had gone white, then red, her composure finally cracking completely. "No," she said flatly. "Absolutely not. Your Majesty, you cannot possibly be considering completing a mate bond with this girl. Our betrothal has been arranged for 2 years. My family has provided troops, resources, political support. You would throw all of that away for an Omega who might possibly maybe have some ancient bloodline. It is political suicide. Your family has been well compensated for." "Their support," Theron replied, his voice cold. "And I do not recall ever agreeing to the betrothal. That was my council's arrangement, not mine. I have been clear from the beginning that I would only marry my true mate." "And you believe she is your true mate based on what? A feeling?" The fact that your beast likes her? Seraphine's voice rose, losing all pretense of courtesy. I am a royal alpha. I have trained my entire life to be a queen. She has trained to make soup. Enough. Theron's command cracked through the room like thunder. Power rolled off him in visible waves, and even Seraphine stepped back, her alpha pride forcing her to submit to his stronger will. You forget yourself, Lady Seraphine. I am the king. I do not answer to you or your family. If I say Alara is my mate, then she is my mate. If I say she will be investigated as a possible guardian heir, then she will be investigated. Your opinions on the matter are noted and disregarded. He stood, moving around the table until he stood beside Alara's chair. I can feel the mate bond as clearly as I feel my own heartbeat. It is real, it is powerful, and it will not be denied. He looked down at Alara, and his expression softened. The question is not whether she is my mate. The question is whether she is ready to accept what that means. Alara felt trapped between terror and hope. Everything was moving so fast. Yesterday she had been invisible. Today the king was declaring her his mate in front of his entire council. I need time, she whispered. I need to understand what I am before I can understand what I am supposed to be to you. Then time is what you will have. Theron agreed. But not too much. The full moon is 3 days away. If what Elder Cassius says is true, if completing the mate bond could break your binding and release your guardian nature, then we should attempt it during the full moon when the goddess's power is strongest. 3 days, Alara repeated numbly. You want me to decide my entire future in 3 days. I want you to decide if you are willing to try to become who you were always meant to be, Theron corrected. The future will shape itself once you are whole. Before Alara could respond, the doors to the chamber burst open. A guard stumbled in, his face pale, blood streaming from a wound on his shoulder. Your Majesty, we are under attack. The northern borders, creatures are pouring through. Not rogues, something else, something old. Theron was moving before the guard finished speaking. Commander Marcus, assemble the troops. Elder Cassius, take Alara somewhere safe. Lady Seraphine, you should return to your family's estate until this is resolved. I will not hide while my kingdom is under attack, Seraphine protested. You are not essential personnel in this crisis, Theron replied bluntly. Go home. He paused at the door, looking back at Alara. Stay safe. I will return as soon as I can. The firstborn will protect you. Then he was gone, and chaos erupted. Elder Cassius tried to guide Alara out of the chamber, but she found her feet would not move. Something was wrong. She could feel it, a pulling sensation in her chest, a certainty that she could not explain. The firstborn suddenly stood, its hackles raised, looking toward the northern windows. It made a sound, a high keening that raised every hair on Alara's body. And then she felt it. A presence, dark and hungry, and impossibly ancient. It was searching for something. It was searching for her. They are coming for me, she said aloud, the knowledge absolute. Whatever is attacking, they are coming for me. Elder Cassius grabbed her arm. Then we need to get you to the safe rooms immediately. But before they could move, the windows exploded inward. Glass rained down like deadly snow, and through the opening came creatures that looked like shadows given form. They had eyes of burning red, and their mouths opened too wide, revealing rows of teeth that glowed with sickly green light. The firstborn roared and launched itself at the creatures, its massive jaws closing around one and shaking it like a rag doll. But there were too many. They kept coming, pouring through the broken windows, their focus entirely on Alara. Guards rushed in, engaging the creatures with swords and claws, but their weapons seemed to pass through the shadow forms, without causing real damage. Seraphine had shifted into her wolf form, a beautiful golden beast that was nevertheless no match for these things. Elder Cassius pushed Alara behind him, chanting in the old tongue, and a barrier of light formed around them. But Alara could see it flickering, weakening under the assault. One of the creatures broke through. It moved with impossible speed, reaching for Alara with hands that ended in claws of pure darkness. She did not think. She just reacted. Her hand came up, and the word that came from her mouth was not one she knew, was not one she had ever learned. It was a word from the dreams, from the visions, from the blood that sang in her veins. Power exploded outward. The creature disintegrated, simply ceased to exist as if it had never been. The light that came from Alara's hand was silver and pure, and where it touched the shadow creatures, they screamed and dissolved. She could not stop it. The power kept coming, pouring out of her in waves, and she felt something inside her breaking, shattering, releasing. The binding. The ritual that had locked away her true. Nature was crumbling under the force of her terror and her desperate need to protect those around her. Memories flooded her mind. Not memories from this life, but from the blood, from the ancestors who had lived and died before she was born. She saw the first ceremony, the moon goddess herself placing her hands on the heads of the chosen ones. She felt the weight of responsibility, the sacred duty to protect the balance. She remembered languages that had not been spoken in 1,000 years. And she remembered her name, not Alara. That was the name given to hide her. Her true name, the name written in her blood and soul, was Alara Moonwhisper, last daughter of the guardian line, heir to the royal protectors, chosen of the goddess. The power finally subsided, leaving her gasping and weak. The chamber was silent except for the sound of her ragged breathing. Every shadow creature had been destroyed. The firstborn stood before her, its head bowed in that gesture of recognition and reverence. Elder Cassius stared at her with wide eyes, his face a mixture of awe and fear. "Impossible," he whispered. The royal guardian line was wiped out. Every member was accounted for. Almost every member, Alara corrected, and her voice sounded different even to her own ears, layered with power and authority that had not been there before. My parents hid me. They gave me a false name, bound my power, and placed me where no one would think to look. Among the common wolves, invisible and overlooked, they died to keep the secret. She looked down at her hands, which still glowed faintly with silver light. But the binding was not meant to break this way. It was supposed to be gentle, controlled, with guidance. Instead, it shattered. And now I can feel everything. Every life in this palace. Every heartbeat. Every breath. It is overwhelming. Seraphine had shifted back to her human form, her face pale. "This changes nothing," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Guardian. Bloodline or not, you are still untrained, still unprepared to be queen." "You are right," Alara agreed, surprising everyone. "I am unprepared. I do not know how to control this power. I do not know the rituals or the responsibilities. I am exactly as much of a disaster as you predicted." She took a shaky breath. "But I am also the king's true mate, and I am the only person in this kingdom who can command the firstborn. And I apparently can destroy shadow creatures that your trained warriors could not touch. So perhaps being prepared is overrated." The sound of running footsteps announced Theron's return. He burst through the damaged doors, his eyes wild, his power crackling around him. "Alara," he breathed, crossing the room in 3 strides. "I felt it. I felt your power wake. Are you hurt?" "I am fine. Confused, exhausted, glowing slightly, but fine." She tried for a smile and almost managed it. The binding broke. "I think I might be a guardian after all." His hands came up to cup her face, and his touch was an anchor in the chaos. "I felt your terror through the bond. I felt the moment your power erupted. It took everything I had not to abandon the fight and come to you immediately. You stayed where you were needed. That was the right choice." She leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his presence. What attacked us? What were those things? Ancient magic, old grudges given form. My presence at the borders drew them away from the palace, which was their real target. His eyes hardened. Someone knew you were here. Someone knew what you might be, and sent those creatures to kill you before your power could fully wake. Who would do that? Someone who has reason to fear a guardian's return. Theron looked at Elder Cassius. I need every text we have on the old enemies of the Guardian lines. Someone has been planning this for a long time. Your Majesty, Elder Cassius said carefully. If Alara truly is the last royal guardian, if her bloodline is authentic, then her very existence rewrites the power structure of our entire world. There will be many who see her as a threat. The councils of all the territories, the other Alpha Kings, even some within our own court. Then they will have to learn to accept a new reality. Theron replied flatly. He pulled Alara closer, his arms wrapping around her in a protective embrace that felt like coming home. Because I am not giving her up. Not for politics, not for power, not for anything. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Seraphine made a strangled sound and fled the room, her dignity finally completely shattered. Alara would have felt sorry for her if she had any emotional energy left to spare. What happens now? She asked against Theron's chest, her voice muffled by his shirt. Now we prepare for the full moon ceremony. Your binding broke, but your power is raw, uncontrolled. The mate bond will help stabilize it, will help you. Learn to channel it properly. And it will also make the formal declaration that you are my chosen queen, which should discourage at least some of the assassination attempts. His attempt at humor fell flat, but she appreciated the effort. And if I cannot control the power, if it destroys me or someone else, then I will be there to pull you back. That is what mates do, Alara. We balance each other. My strength helps ground your power. Your light helps temper my darkness. Together we become something greater than either of us alone. He pulled back enough to look into her eyes. I know this is fast. I know it is terrifying. But I also know it is right. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Alara wanted to argue. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was too much, too fast, too impossible. But the mate bond hummed between them, and the newly awakened guardian instincts whispered that he was telling the truth. They were meant for this, meant for each other, meant to face whatever came together. 3 days, she said quietly. I need these 3 days to learn what I can, to understand my power, to prepare. And then on the full moon, I will complete the bond with you. Not because I am forced to, not because I have no other choice, but because I want to, because you are right. This is bigger than both of us, and we face it together, or we fail separately. Theron's smile was brilliant, transforming his usually stern features into something almost boyish. Then we have 3 days to make you ready to become the most powerful queen this kingdom has ever seen. He kissed her forehead, a gentle brush of lips that still sent heat racing through her entire body. Come, let us find you a proper teacher. Elder Cassius knows the rituals, but we will need someone with practical experience in controlling ancient power. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. Alara spent hours in the archives, studying texts written in languages that her newly awakened blood allowed her to read. She practiced channeling her power under Elder Cassius's guidance, learning to call the silver light at will and to direct it with precision. The firstborn never left her side, and she discovered that she could feel its thoughts, could communicate with it on a level that went beyond words. Its name, she learned, was Kairos, which meant the supreme moment in the old tongue. It had been waiting for a guardian to wake, had been sleeping in the Shadowlands precisely because it knew that eventually one of the bloodline would come seeking power and would accidentally wake it. You orchestrated this, she accused it during one of their practice sessions. You allowed Theron to find you, to wake you, to bring you here because you knew I was here. The beast, Kairos, did not deny it. The blood calls to blood. The guardian line was meant to be protected by the firstborn. When you were hidden, when your power was bound, I went dormant as... well. But when the Alpha King came seeking ancient power, I felt you nearby. I allowed myself to be found so that I could find you. You have been manipulating all of us, Alara said, but there was no real anger in her voice. How could she be angry at a creature that had orchestrated her salvation? I have been protecting you, Kairos corrected. As is my purpose, as is my honor. Training with the power was exhausting. Alara discovered that she could heal minor wounds with a touch, could sense. The emotional states of those around her could create barriers of light that were strong enough to withstand a full Alpha's assault. But the power also fought her, wanting to burst free without control, and she had to constantly work to maintain discipline. Theron visited her each evening, spending time simply talking, helping her relax after the intensive training. He told her about his childhood, about the pressure of being raised to be king, about his mother who had died when he was 20, and left a hole in his life that had never fully healed. She would have liked you, he said one evening as they sat in Alara's chambers, watching the fire. She always said that true strength came from surviving impossible circumstances with grace intact. You embody that. I do not feel graceful, Alara admitted. I feel like I am barely holding myself together. That is the definition of grace under pressure. He reached over and took her hand, the now familiar spark of the mate bond arcing between them. Tomorrow is the full moon. Tomorrow, everything changes. Are you ready? No, she answered honestly. But I am willing. And maybe that is enough. The ceremony was to be held in the ancient temple at the heart of the palace grounds. It was a structure that dated back to the Guardian era, built of white stone that seemed to glow under moonlight. As the sun set on the third day, Alara found herself being prepared by Marie and the other attendants. They dressed her in a gown of pure, white silk that seemed to shimmer with its own light. It was sleeveless, leaving her arms bare, and the back dipped low, traditional for a claiming ceremony. Her hair was left loose, cascading down her back in waves that the attendants had somehow coaxed into perfection. Around her throat, they placed a collar of silver ancient guardian symbols etched into the metal. You look like a goddess, Marie whispered, tears in her eyes. Miss Alara, I have served in this palace for 10 years, and I have never seen anything like this. You are going to be magnificent. Or a magnificent disaster, Alara replied, but she smiled to show she was teasing. Her hands shook as she looked at herself in the mirror. This was really happening. In less than an hour, she would be bound to Theron, would become his mate and his queen, would take on responsibilities she barely understood. Ilara. Elder Cassius stood in the doorway, his formal robes making him look even more ancient than usual. It is time. The king awaits at the temple. The walk through the palace was surreal. Guards lined the corridors, their fists over their hearts in salute. Servants stopped their work to bow as she passed. News of what she was, of what she might become, had spread through the palace like wildfire. Some looked at her with hope, others with fear, a few with barely concealed hostility. She could feel all of it now, the emotions of those around her crashing against her newly awakened senses like waves. But she kept her head high, kept moving forward. Kairos walked beside her, a massive guardian that no one dared approach. The temple was already filled with witnesses. The council members, high-ranking nobles, military commanders, all those whose presence was required by tradition. And standing at the altar, dressed in ceremonial robes of black and silver, was Theron. He took her breath away. He had always been handsome, but in this moment, with the rising moon casting silver light through the temple, windows? He looked almost otherworldly. His eyes found hers across the distance, and she felt the mate bond surge with recognition and need. Elder Cassius led her down the central aisle. She was distantly aware of the whispers, the shocked gasps as people got their first real look at her in her guardian regalia. But all that mattered was Theron, waiting for her, his expression a mixture of reverence and barely controlled desire. When she reached the altar, Elder Cassius placed her hand in Theron's and stepped back. "We gather under the full moon to witness a sacred bond," the elder intoned, his voice carrying through the temple. "A bond not just between two individuals, but between two souls chosen by the moon goddess herself to walk together through whatever trials await." Theron's hand tightened on hers, warm and solid and real. In the old ways, before politics corrupted our rituals, a mating ceremony was a simple thing. Two people, the moon, a choice to bind their lives together. Tonight, we return to that simplicity. Tonight, we honor the old ways. He gestured to the open roof of the temple, where the full moon was just beginning to rise, huge and luminous. "Alpha King Theron, do you claim this woman as your true mate, recognizing her as your equal, your partner, your chosen one?" "I do," Theron replied, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. "Guardian Alara Moonwhisper, last of the royal protectors, do you accept this claiming? Do you bind yourself to this man as his mate, his queen, his anchor?" Alara felt every eye in the temple on her. This was the moment, the last chance to turn back, to refuse, to choose safety over destiny. She thought of the kitchen where she had hidden for 5 years. She thought of all the times she had been invisible, insignificant, nothing. She thought of her parents who had died to protect her, who had bound her power and hidden her away so that she might survive to this moment. And she thought of Theron, who had, looked at her and seen not a kitchen worker but a queen, who had felt the mate bond and refused to deny it for politics or convenience, who had promised to face whatever came together. "I accept," she said clearly. "I claim him as mine, even as he claims me. I bind my life to his, my power to his strength, my destiny to his." The moment the words left her lips, the world exploded into sensation. The mate bond, which had been humming quietly between them for days, suddenly blazed into full life. It was not gentle. It was overwhelming, all-consuming. A connection so deep that Alara could not tell where she ended and Theron began. She felt his love, his fierce protectiveness, his absolute commitment. She felt his wolf recognizing her on every level. And beneath it all, she felt his relief that she had not refused him, that she had chosen this path willingly. "The bond is accepted," Elder Cassius announced. "By the power vested in me by the moon goddess and the ancient laws, I declare." These two mated before all witnesses. "What has been joined, let no one sunder." Theron pulled her close, and his mouth descended on hers in a kiss that sent shockwaves through her entire body. This was nothing like the gentle kiss he had given her forehead days ago. This was claiming, possessive and demanding, and she responded with equal intensity. Power erupted around them. Her silver light and his golden alpha aura mixed and swirled, creating patterns in the air that made several witnesses cry out in awe. The magic of the guardian bloodline and the power of the Alpha King combining, creating something entirely new. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alara realized she was crying. Happy tears, overwhelmed tears, tears of relief and joy and terror all mixed together. "My queen," Theron whispered against her temple. "My mate, my Alara." "My king," she replied. "My Theron, my choice." The witnesses erupted into cheers, though Alara noted that not everyone was celebrating. A few faces in the crowd were carefully blank, already calculating how this change would affect their political positions. But she did not care. Not in this moment. Kairos let out a howl, a sound of pure joy that was picked up by every wolf in the palace. Soon the entire kingdom echoed with the song of wolves announcing their new queen. The celebration that followed was a blur. Alara was introduced to what felt like hundreds of people, their names and faces blending together. She was toasted, congratulated, assessed with calculating eyes by those who wondered how to use her or destroy her. Through it all, Theron remained at her side, his hand at her back, his presence a constant anchor. It was near midnight when they were finally able to escape to Theron's private chambers. The moment the door closed behind them, Theron pulled her into his arms again, his mouth finding hers with desperate need. "I have been waiting for this moment since the second I caught you in the, throne room," he murmured against her lips. "Do you have any idea how difficult it has been to behave with propriety these past 3 days?" "Show me," Alara replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "Show me what it means to be claimed by an alpha king." His eyes flashed gold, and his wolf surged to the surface. Gladly. What followed was hours of discovery, of pleasure so intense it bordered on pain, of two souls learning the landscape of each other's bodies and hearts. When they finally collapsed together, tangled in sheets and each other, Alara felt fundamentally changed. The mate bond was complete. She could feel Theron's heartbeat as if it were her own, could sense his emotions, his thoughts, his very essence twined with hers. "I can feel you," she whispered in awe. "I can feel everything. This is what it means to be mated." "This is what it means to be whole," Theron corrected. "I did not realize how incomplete I was until I found you. You are the piece I did not know I was." Missing. They lay in comfortable silence for a while, watching the moon through the window. Then Theron spoke again, his voice more serious. "You know this is only the beginning, right? The ceremony makes you queen, but it does not solve our problems. There will be challenges from other territories. There will be attempts to undermine your authority. And there are still those shadow creatures to deal with, whoever sent them." "I know," Alara replied. "But we face it together now. That makes all the difference." "Together," Theron agreed, pulling her closer. "Always together." The next morning, Alara woke to find herself in the king's bed, sunlight streaming through windows, and Theron already awake and watching her with an expression of such contentment that it made her heart ache. "Good morning, my queen," he said softly. "How do you feel?" She took inventory. The mate bond thrummed with life, connecting them on every level. Her guardian powers felt more stable, anchored by Theron's strength. And despite everything that had happened, despite all the uncertainty ahead, she felt oddly at peace. "I feel ready," she answered. "Ready for whatever comes next." "Good, because we have our first challenge arriving within the hour." At her questioning look, he elaborated. "The other Alpha Kings have heard about our mating. They are sending representatives to assess the situation, to determine if you are truly a guardian, or if this is some elaborate deception. Let them come," Alara said, feeling her power rise at the challenge. "Let them see what a guardian can do. Let them understand that the old ways are not as dead as they thought." Theron's smile was fierce and proud. "That is my queen speaking." The meeting was held in the throne room, with all the formal pomp and ceremony that such an occasion demanded. Representatives from the 4 other Alpha Kings stood before the throne where Theron sat with Alara at his side, their hands intertwined on the armrest between them. She could feel their skepticism, their disdain for an Omega who dared to sit as queen, could sense their calculations about how to use this situation to their advantage. "So this is the Guardian," one of the representatives, a harsh-faced woman named Mira, said with barely concealed contempt. She does not look like much. No offense, Your Majesty, but the old texts describe guardians as beings of incredible power. This girl barely radiates anything. Appearances can be deceiving, Theron replied mildly. Perhaps you would like a demonstration. Before Mira could respond, the doors to the throne room burst open. Guards rushed in, their faces panicked. Your Majesty, we are under attack again. More of those shadow creatures, hundreds of them. They have breached the outer walls. Theron was on his feet instantly, his alpha power filling the room. Evacuate the civilians. Get the representatives to safety. Commander Marcus, with me. No, Alara said clearly, standing as well. This is exactly what we needed. A demonstration. She walked down from the dais, feeling all eyes on her. The silver symbols on her collar began to glow, and her power rose like a tide. You want to know if I am truly a guardian? Then watch, learn, and remember this moment when you report back to your kings. She strode toward the doors, and Kairos materialized from the shadows to walk beside her. The representatives, despite their fear, followed, unable to resist witnessing what would happen. The outer courtyard was chaos. Shadow creatures poured through breaks in the walls, their red eyes blazing, their distorted forms spreading corruption wherever they touched. Guards fought valiantly, but were being overwhelmed. Alara stopped at the top of the courtyard steps and raised her hands. The words that came from her mouth were in the old tongue, the language of the first guardians, and they resonated with power that shook the very stones of the palace. Light exploded from her in a nova of silver radiance. It swept across the courtyard like a cleansing fire, and where it touched the shadow creatures, they simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not defeated, but unmade, returned to the nothingness from which they had been called. In less than a minute, every shadow creature was gone. The courtyard was silent, except for the heavy breathing of the guards, and the soft sound of Alara's power slowly receding. She turned to face the representatives, who stood frozen in shock and awe. Any questions about my legitimacy? She asked calmly. Or would you like another demonstration? Mira dropped to one knee, her head bowed. Guardian Alara, please forgive my earlier disrespect. I did not understand. None of us understood. One by one, the other representatives also knelt. Not to Theron, though he was their superior in rank. They knelt to Alara, recognizing the return of a power that transcended even the authority of Alpha Kings. Theron moved to stand beside her, his hand finding hers. Let it be known across all territories, he announced. The Guardian line has returned. Queen Alara Moonwhisper, my mate and the kingdom's protector, stands as proof that the old ways are not lost. And any who threaten this kingdom, any who threaten my queen, will face the combined might of an Alpha King and a Royal Guardian. We are stronger together than any enemy can imagine. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? Alara felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, but it did not feel crushing. With Theron beside her, with the mate bond strengthening them both, with her power finally awakened and her purpose clear, she felt capable of facing whatever challenges awaited. Rise, she commanded the representatives gently. Return to your kings and tell them the truth. Tell them that the Guardians have returned to protect the balance, not to threaten anyone's power. Tell them that I seek cooperation, not conquest. But also tell them that I will protect what is mine with every ounce of power I possess. As the representatives departed, as the guards began repairs on the walls, as normal life slowly resumed, Alara leaned against Theron and allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. We did it, she whispered. We actually did it. You did it, he corrected. You went from invisible to legendary in less than a week. I merely had the good sense to recognize your worth when everyone else was blind. You gave me the chance to become who I was meant to be. That is no small thing." She looked up at him, love and gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for choosing me. I will choose you every day for the rest of our lives," Theron promised. "That is what mates do. That is what we do." In the weeks that followed, Ilara settled into her role as queen. It was not easy. There were nobles who resented her. Rise. There were political complications with the other territories. There were endless ceremonies and protocols to learn. But she faced each challenge with growing confidence, her guardian powers developing under Elder Cassius's patient tutelage. She discovered that she could sense imbalances in the natural order, could feel when dark magic was being used anywhere in the kingdom. She could heal not just physical wounds, but spiritual ones, helping shifters who had been damaged by trauma or dark magic to find wholeness again. And she could command not just Kairos, but any creature of the primal force, the ancient beings that existed before the world was divided into mundane and magical. Theron proved to be not just a mate, but a true partner. He consulted her on policy decisions, valued her input even when it contradicted his own thoughts, and never once treated her as less than his equal, despite her lack of formal training. Together, they began to reshape the kingdom. They established new laws protecting the vulnerable, created systems to identify and train those with guardian bloodline traces who might exist in hiding, and opened diplomatic channels with other supernatural species that had been isolated for centuries. 6 months after the mating ceremony, Ilara stood on the balcony of the palace, looking out over the city that had become her home. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, and she could feel the pulse of life throughout the kingdom, through her guardian senses. Theron's arms wrapped around her from behind, and she leaned back into his warmth. "Happy?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life. 6 months ago, I was scrubbing pots. Now I am a queen and a guardian, and I am mated to the most incredible man I have ever known." "I am the lucky one," Theron insisted. "I got a mate, a queen, and a guardian all in one. Remarkable package. Not to mention the best partner I could have asked for in running this kingdom." "We make a good team," Ilara agreed. She turned in his arms, standing on her toes to kiss him softly. "Thank you for believing in me before I believed in myself." "Always," he promised. "From the moment the firstborn bowed to you, I knew you were extraordinary. I am just grateful you chose to share your life with me." As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars began to appear, Ilara felt profound peace. Her journey from invisible Omega to queen and guardian had been impossible, terrifying, and absolutely perfect. She had found her power, her purpose, and her person. And whatever challenges the future might bring, she would face them with Theron at her side, their mate, bond unbreakable, their combined strength more than equal to any threat. The kitchen girl who thought she was nothing had become a queen who changed everything, and she was just getting started.